Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to ladies and gentlemen. No matter where you are, I hope you are doing well. My name is Xianwei, a MASA representative, and I'll be your moderator for today. Firstly, I would like to thank Architects 2020 for giving MASA an opportunity to conduct this session. We are pleased to have this collaboration with Architects. For those who don't know what MASA is, I hope you can lend me your ear as I explain further. MASA stands for Malaysia Architecture Students Alliance, and it is a non-profit student committee operating directly under Pertubuhan Architect Malaysia or PAM, consisting of student representatives from all architecture institutes in Malaysia. It is a platform where Malaysian architecture students join forces to learn and share with appreciation of the past, generating sustainable living in the present and bringing unlimited possibilities to the future. Our mission is to develop an effective platform and network between Malaysian architecture students and professionals. We also serve as liaisons between students and PEM. We represent the voices from architecture students. This is what we are. So today, we are proud to present our special guest, Architect Ajanta Aziz, the chairman of PEM Education Committee, and Architect Serina Hijjas, who will be sharing her experience and thoughts on an intriguing topic. To begin with, let us welcome Architect Ajanta Aziz to say a few words. Hello, Architect
Right.
Ajanta.
Yeah,
How
thank
are
you,
you?
Zanwe. Good morning. Yeah, thank you so much for your introduction. Yeah, good morning. Salam sejahtera, selamat pagi, Chousan, Kalevanakam. My name is Architect Adranta Aziz. I would like to welcome all of you, especially for the students. Thank you so much for your time. So these sessions, I would like to say thank you to CIS, where they can brought us through this platform, undertaken by MASA, Malaysian Architecture Student Alliance, and as the chairman of PAM Education and also deputy chairman of Acacia Committee Architectural Education, AKAI, I would like to say thank you again to all of you to participate this event, where I believe this good platform, the best platform for students to communicate to building industry, especially to professional architects. Today, 26 September, Architects Fast Forward webinar series under education, brought to you by Architects Online. I would like to say thank you to CIS, my good friends behind the scenes, Joyce and Lillian. Thank you so much to organize this. And joint organized by PAM under PAM Education, Malaysian Institute of Architects, and CIS, and also to MASA. Well, let's welcome for today's speaker, Architect Serina Hijjas. But let me share with you her biography. So be ready to hear her session. Today, a very special and such a beautiful Saturday today. Well, Architect Serina Hijjas is one of the creative partners at Hijjas Architects and Planners, and is known for changing the building landscape of architecture through buildings that are responsive, energy conscious, and bold. Her formative years exposed her to energy efficiency and sustainable design, starting from the Harriet Watt University to the New Shell and Cellcom Tower. The approach to design is totally holistic, connections of placemaking, environmental sustainability, with a view in generating new strategies in every project. Currently, Hijaz is working on an urban regeneration and waste to energy project, while architect Serina Hijjas lectures on rethinking sustainability and is a working member of Green Building Index and Malaysian Green Building Council. My dear viewers, dear students, we have mainly two factors to respond to it in our built environment, which is heat island or rising temperatures and torrential rain. In creating spaces in the desertification of our cities, where demand evokes necessity to move vertically, and how can we create our cities to be more livable for people, is about asking how nature and the natural environment should merge with the places we create and inhabit to be one contagious space. Here you are. Architect Serina Hijjas will be giving us an insight on the topic creating spaces for people, horizontal and vertical living. Well, my dear students, dear viewers, just sit back, relax, gain positive energy, set positive mindset, and enjoy Architect Serina Hijjas' sharing moment. So if you have any question, feel free to drop the questions or the comment or chat section into your screen, and we will do our best to try answer them during the Q&A session by the end of today's talk. So, are you ready? Without further ado, let's welcome Architect Serina Hijjas. Hi, Architect Serina. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Good morning. Thank you so much to spending time with us. We're really grateful, and it's just an honor to have you today.
Thank you very much. It's very unusual because this platform that I'm presenting on today, I've never used before. Plus, I can't even see any of you, so I feel I'm not even in Ellen's show where virtually now she can actually see virtual pictures of her audience. I can't even see
Beautiful.
more. So
Beautiful.
thank you for the honor of inviting me to speak, MASA and architects. I'm very honored that you thought that I'm worth listening to. So I hope I'll be able to entertain you, inspire you, and really that's my motivation. My motivation is to inspire up-and-coming architects, students in really pushing the building envelope with innovation and ideas. So let
Wonderful.
me take you through some of
Okay.
the ideas I have.
All right. Let's begin.
I changed my title a bit because I've been working on this idea, creating spaces for people horizontally and vertical living, to responsive architecture. I think it's because we are in the age of climate change. In New York City, I think in one of the cities, digitally on the building, it's actually telling us how many more years we have till we reach the 1.5 degrees. Some are saying 7, some are saying 17. So I think we are living in an age where we need to be responsive, very responsive to climate change and greening our environment. So when I was small, so I'm not going to say how old I was when this happened. I start with this because for me, it's quite inspiring in the sense that, in 1969, man laid their first foot onto the moon. And since then, we've been able to see the Earth from afar and monitor the Earth as a global sphere and see exactly what is happening everywhere around the world. So stepping on the moon was not so much about embarking and our adventure to other planets, but for me, you will see later, it's an appreciation of our planet Earth. I bring these two figures out. It's an unusual one. I think some of you may know, but from NASA, from setting on the moon and having satellites that orbit around the Earth, we're able to basically monitor the changes that are happening on Earth. And in 2000, they measured that the ozone layer was depleting and that was creating a hole in the North Pole. And what you see on the left is in the year 2000. And what you see on the right is that the ozone layer has reduced, and it only has reduced because in 1987, United Nations introduced something called the Montreal Protocol that banned CFCs and fluorocarbons into the atmosphere. But it's taken us something like 30 years to reduce the ozone layer by about 20%, even from banning CFCs and fluorocarbon. And it's estimated that we won't recover till the year 2040. I bring that up to you because whatever actions we take now will not be immediate. It will take years before we can reverse whatever is happening to climate change and the planet as we sit here. And so we are already approaching the 1.5 degree limit. And we will see these repercussions by, the effects of coastal flooding, urban heat island, and everything on the planet, including biodiversity depletion, which is already happening. So I don't know about you, but I picked up a book that said what the FUCK on the planet is about, telling you what is changing in the planet, and that really is affecting how I see we build, how we create, how we innovate moving forward. So I came from a background of architecture, and the buildings that were done by Hijjas before were predominantly bold still, iconic, strong identity, a lot of black and whites. And my first job when I returned back from studies in the UK, this was one of my first projects that I worked with in collaboration within the office. I've got to say that a lot of works are really developed in a collaborative way. So whilst we lead a sort of ideas and the direction, the best of works comes through collaborative thinking. So this was one of my first projects, which was the Menara Telecom. And it was the first idea to bring sky gardens to buildings, because when I came back with this idea of green buildings already some 30 years ago when I first started. And that started a conversation of a series of different buildings, and you may see that they are something similar to the form. They're all curvaceous, from the telecom building to Securities Commission to Ericsson to Convention Center. They in the lower buildings, they have this sort of big umbrella roof that goes to it. They were about identity. They were about environment. And they were about ways of looking and transparency. And since then, the buildings that I've been involved in have moved and shifted with a lot of the same ideas and themes that are seen in all these buildings. And the ideas that are generated in a lot of these buildings, or a lot of people will say, Hijjas is all about forms. Hijjas buildings are not just about forms. There are a lot of content inside the buildings and a lot of ideas that you will see later on. But one of the distinct things that we like to have in our buildings is a silhouette, a strong silhouette of the building. Because in a strong silhouette of the building, people retain the idea of what this building is about, and that memory is a strong icon in itself. And it's not about big buildings necessarily. But when you look at a Hijjas building, there is a lot more layering in the ideas that come into play that you don't see. There is a climatic response, there's identity, there's material, there's daylight harvesting, there is energies, there's transparency. Some buildings where we can introduce passive design. There is a very sort of scientific approach in some ways to some of the buildings in the building facade, but a lot of them are in a response to people and place. So one of the second buildings that I worked on was something called Pusaka Seni and Pustaka. And this is, I'm not sure if many of you know, but this building was developed by the idea of two ideas that came to this. One is that this is a Bank Negara building, and it is Bank Negara deals in money. And one of the first forms of money was the cowrie shell, which was a form of exchange of money at that time. Of course, since now we've developed into something that, you're dealing with actual monies and coins, and now we're dealing with Bitcoin, which is something virtual that you actually don't see. The second idea and element inside this building was derived from the heritage of the kain songket, but the kain songket was, in terms of the geometry and weaving of the fabric, was then abstracted into pixelation and diamond geometry and wrapped around the whole building in the form of a series of stone, glass, and even titanium on the building. It's the only building in Malaysia that has titanium on it, which is actually on the museum side. This was one of the most complex buildings we ever actually have built. And not many people will know that the idea is that there's 2 million square feet of built up building in this building. It's almost 2/3 the height of the Petronas Towers, but done horizontally. It has more than 1,000 car parks that is submerged underneath the building. And what we wanted to give was this sense of lightness and pavilion. And the front buildings are 3 series of buildings of pavilions that are Pusaka, Seni, and Pustaka because of the function of the buildings inside. And this is a view of the building. I've got to say that when I said it was the most complex building, it looks rather simple. But right at the beginning, we looked at the environmental aspects of it and how we brought the daylight in the atrium spaces, how we responded to north-south. The building is predominantly north-south, and heat gain is mostly in the east and west. How we wanted to bring light in was also very important. And but at the scale of the human level, it wanted to appear very low-rise and approachable. And the building, whilst it has different components in the building, responds by wrapping a building fabric that is contiguous around, but in the details are quite different. There were more than 22 types of facades on this building. As I said, it was one of the most complex buildings that we had done. From the eyelids, whenever we do a design, and I don't know if it's the same for yourselves, that you, whatever research you do influences the work that you do later on. So this diamond facade that you see here appears again in the tower of 4G11 in Putrajaya and appears again as eyelids on the building. And the songket is also appearing in the boulevard of Putrajaya, which is also done by us, this 3-kilometer landscape planning of the boulevard with a matrix of diamond grids going down was also developed with that. So it was probably something that we were very fascinated about, and we adopted it into the building and created something that was quite unique but quite responsive in the facade. So some of this were just a lot of the times when we start a competition or an idea, we look at it in a very holistic way, and we also work with engineers together, both the MAP and structure simultaneously. We work in a more collaborative way to get the best out of from them, and also some of the ideas generated with them. So you can see that the way the air system works inside this building. So as I was mentioning, from the outside, you don't understand the layering and the complexity of the building, but there is a whole series of ideas that are generated inside the building. One of them, of course, was this continuous Nautilus staircase, which spirals up the building. It actually starts, we wanted something that dynamic as you were at the base of the building and you're looking up. The experience of going into the museum, probably from a memory of going to the IMP building at the Louvre, where there is a huge spiral staircase that brings you from ground to lower ground. But in this case, it's a continuous opening up of a spiral that goes up to the top. So it is not a constant spiral. it is a Nautilus staircase, which actually gets bigger and bigger as it goes up to the top. So complex as it is, and it looks continuous because we use pewter render onto the building, which is basically a special, because we wanted it to be Malaysian. That's why you see we've actually used pewter for the first time in this spiral staircase going up. Another interesting building for us and evoking ideas of portability was the Malaysian Pavilion. And it was the first time that the Malaysian Pavilion at Expo did not represent a Minangkabau roof. So it was a shift, an idea that broke the normal rule, because I think in all the other expos that Malaysia was represented, it was always this cultural building that looked like a Minangkabau. In this case, we actually explored something completely different. We wanted to take something that would inspire from nature, and the idea of the portable house. When I was studying at university, the idea of portability is nothing new in the Asian context. House can be completely built in timber. In example, we have one house, obviously, that's a 100-year-old house at Serina Hijjas' house in Rimbundahan, where the house was built in Perak, and then it was disassembled and moved and reassembled exactly, and it now stands as a 100-year-old house. So portability, we were introducing the idea. This was before Expo 2020, because in Expo 2015, the idea was to be more sustainable as a pavilion, that we could build something and then we could pack it all up and bring it home. But because to build in Malaysia is is cheaper than building in Europe, the cost to bring it back was too expensive for us. But the whole idea was to use a resource material that did not use too much material. Also, the idea here, again, when you are designing and thinking about buildings, you obviously do research. Malaysia hosts the largest biodiversity in the world, in terms that it has the rainforest, and that it only covers 6% of the overall world. So we have something that is quite precious that we should maintain in our scene. So the idea here for the pavilion in the seeds from the rainforest as a metaphor, and they were built using timber. So the ideas behind this was to exemplify the biodiversity and the uniqueness within of Malaysia's biodiversity to the world, both for medicinal value in terms of the humanity level, in terms of the biodiversity level. And so from the humble rice seeds, we took this inspiration and we translated it as it is a pavilion, and it's supposed to be something of an experience, which is quite different from normal buildings. But at the same time, we looked at the whole sustainability component, from the ground source cooling to water collection to the skin of the fabric of the building. So it was very interesting experience, because all of these timbers were manufactured in Johor and then assembled by Italians in Italy. And it makes for a very interesting glue lamp story in terms of building. So I think this was our exploration of trying to showcase the best of Malaysia, both in terms of the richness of their diversity, but also in terms of the materiality. And it was one of the best pavilions at Expo. And it really was for us to become an inspiration to Malaysia itself, that we can show that even though we're a small country, we certainly have a lot of interesting ideas. And both these pavilions are actually competitions. So we were very fortunate to enter into the second pavilion, Malaysian pavilion. Pavilions are very interesting for us because museums, pavilions are the only typologies of buildings that allow you to express something unique. So, you're not going to get that necessarily with housing or definitely office buildings. There are different types of responses that you would need to take. In the pavilion for Expo 2020, it's still going to be called Expo 2020, but it's going to be held next year instead because of the global pandemic. We came with a totally different idea in the competition. So all that you see here was actually our competition submission right at the beginning, very, very comprehensive, but again, trying to do something that was unique. In this, we call it In the Canopy of Trees, the concept of creating canopies, tree structures as a Malaysian pavilion. I remember when I went to Italy and they said, "Oh, where are you from?" And I said, "We're from Malaysia." And they said, "Oh yeah, we've seen the cartoon animation Sandakan. People live in trees. They live above the ground on stilts and all the rest." And I said, I don't know this animation you're talking about. And it turns out it's an Italian animation on the Malaysian jungle and Malaysian way of life. So it was very ironic. That stayed in my mind, that people's perception that we live on stilts. And it's interesting because as we go forward, and if there's, in the event of climate change, for those who are living by the water's edge, living on stilts may become the new norm, and we will be reverting back to that. So in this pavilion, the Malaysian building on stilts made of natural materials was one of our inspirations. The experience of meandering through the landscape, unique to Malaysia also in terms of our rivers, was an idea that seemed to resonate. And this is the Malaysian Pavilion for Expo 2020. The building is clad and built in steel and timber for sustainability. This will be the first carbon neutral pavilion at Expo, as much as we could do. And the idea of the building is touching the ground lightly, that the experience of the groundscape is as important as the experience of the pavilion itself. And we developed this idea because we were getting a lot of criticism globally about palm oil and reforestation. And not many people know that Malaysia does a lot of reforestation and does sustainable palm oil. And we wanted to showcase that in some form or another, that made a sort of political statement as much as a pavilion statement. So it's an integration, a lot of pavilions about an experience inside. So quite interesting because Singapore Pavilion, which is obviously going to be our competitor in the tropical belt, is actually lifting off the ground too, and but for theirs is a single platform pavilion, and the experience of walking up through there is also an experience, and inside it's actually quite green. So this was some of the design methodology, looking at do we maximize the building on the land? Do we stack it up differently? Do we mimic the tree canopies? And how do we get the experience of meandering path up the building as part of the whole experience of the pavilion? This is a section through the pavilion showing that the pavilion itself, in terms of the exhibition, is above ground, but part of the below ground is also an outdoor experience. eating areas, and then the queuing experience and walking up the ramp is part of the entire experience. And then when you come in, what will that experience be? As mentioned, it is going to be the first carbon neutral pavilion. We obviously maximize as much as possible on the solar panels, but that only generates about 20% of the energy. So part of doing the first carbon neutral pavilion is that we are going to be growing and reforesting trees in Malaysia as part of the carbon exchange that we do, because we're limited to the amount of space that we can build. So we've maxed out completely with regards to energy efficiency, solar. We also have heli fans to scoop air into the place. So we've done as much as we could to optimize on the building itself. And this is the experience of people, how they ramp up into what is the white box experience of the pavilion into the black box experience of the pavilion. And the columns that you see around the building, so we've also introduced a water reel. So it's a sound of water running down the ramp into a water pool with a series of vertical greens and courtyard greens to bring light down to below. So the poles that you see here will actually move a little bit because they rise quite tall. And the lights on it are actually a representation of the fireflies. So it's just a symbolic representation within the pavilion landscape itself. Not many people realize that daylight is a free energy. So it's something that we enjoy in the tropical belt because we get 360 days of 12 hours of sunshine absolutely every day apart from rain. This is quite different if you're living in somewhere in London or New York where, you know, there's daylight times that change between 7 to 3 and all the rest of it. So we are in a unique place in how to optimize on that, but realizing what are the other ideas. So this building about free energy is the new Celcom Tower. I don't know if you remember before that some of these buildings used to have a Celcom building, the old Celcom building used to say, "Welcome to Celcom territory." And they use Usain Bolt as one of their sort of ads in terms of speed of connectivity, providing speed of connectivity to people. So Usain Bolt's ad came after the building. So I've just got to say this did not inspire the form of the building, but in fact the building is a curved building going up. It's at PJ Central. When we developed this building, now some buildings take a long time to complete. Telekom Malaysia, not Securities Commission, but Bank Negara, and this building, they have all taken something like 7 years to complete from start to beginning. So guys, we're in this for the long haul, not for the short haul. But when we were developing the idea for Celcom Tower, this was before the co-working space came in, and we were looking at distributed work options, teleworkers, satellites, move to mobility, change use, where basically they don't work at their desk. So it was an emerging idea, but this is fully taken into this building. The uniqueness of this building is instead of getting a central core, conventionally, we move the cores to the side. That allows us to ventilate the toilets going up naturally instead of mechanically. It also allowed us, and that was the main idea of the building, is to connect the building every 3 floors internally by a mini atria space. So it's, I would say, a kind of hybrid type of core, which was the first. And originally, the building had all these cross braces going up the building. But as a process of designing the building and working with the developer, some of these things get VE'd out. And this is the building itself. So whilst it looks like a totally clad glass building, in fact, on the northeast and southwest sides, where you get a lot of heat gain, is actually predominantly solid where the cores are. So it works in terms of the passive orientation. When dealing with daylight as a free energy, you have to be careful about glare. In the Malaysian context, we get a lot of glare. So the learning experience from here is that when we were designing the building facade, I basically said to the facade engineer that worked with us, when we touch the glass, I don't want to feel the heat of the glass. I want to be able to touch the glass and not feel it's so hot that I can't touch it. So that was one of the ideas for the building. This is the look of the building. Obviously, Celcom, my territory, wanted these LEDs at the side so that they could actually do their advertising. This is the 3-story atria spaces that connects between the office spaces. And it is a completely table-free in the sense that people can move and work wherever in this space. There is not a fixed desk situation in this building. So it's definitely adopted a very new way of working. So I'm showing you the section because it's how it's connecting internally as an office building rather than just connected by lifts. It's connected by staircases, so people have departments can move in and out from one space to the other. A little bit of a detail. This building performs at half the energy of a typical building, even though it is a glass building. And in terms of OTTVs, it's very, very interesting to look at because this is the north and the south. On the southeast, not all facades get the same amount of heat into the space. The OTTV for the glass on this side is actually 53. On this side, which is all glass, is 39. On this side is 32 and 21. So on the sides that are more solid, we're getting a better performance on the OTTV. But you can see that even though it's glass, depending on orientation, and that's why the idea of, if possible, passive orientation of the longitudinal facades to the north and south will make your building perform a lot better. This is the building view. Creating spaces for people horizontally and vertical living has been an idea that we have been studying for some time. How can we change the mindset that we need to live vertically only for low-cost housing to get the density that we need? And how can we create more community livable spaces moving forward and future-proof us? So this is an image of Kuala Lumpur in the 1960s. I've used this before only because I'm of this generation, obviously, where it was much lower scale and closer down to the ground, where people were cycling, were actually using a bit more public transport. And so this is the legacy that we have moving forward. In fact, if you go on the MR2 road around Kuala Lumpur, you see a whole series of these sort of huge developed high-rise. And I feel that high-rise for low-cost living or medium-cost living isn't the best way forward because they don't have the space and they are not connected to the ground. But in the time when the rifle range towers were going up in Penang, and we used to have the same here called Pikeliling, the normal dwellings were very, very, very small. And we would have something like 3,888 units over 17 floors. And we just have to ask ourselves, is this the future that we want? Or is there more humane livables to densification of our cities? So we made the study for the competition, which I'm sure a lot of you entered, but we didn't enter. We lost time working, doing other jobs, so we did not enter, but we did exhibit this idea. And we went around Penang and had a look at the densifications that have moved from 78 units per acre up to 244 units per acre. So in just the last 15 years, we have moved from this to this. And we really wanted to get to an idea of how we can actually move down to a much more neighborhood level densification. So we explored the idea of 8 to 10-story communities or 180 units per acre, which is fairly high, but not as high as the 224. And these were our various studies of that. And one of the main examples that probably inspired us from the beginning was this building called by Moshdi Safdi called Habitat 67. And we thought if we could recreate something like this, but we could turn it upside down, because we need to create a canopy to protect us from the tropical sun, but we could also use it to do planting. We could also use it for urban agriculture, and we could also use it for solar farms on top. So we turned it upside down and we developed something which has more responsive to this environment with a big umbrella canopy roof. And when you angle the facades, you manage to get something at 15 to 25 degrees, and it's self-shading. And this was our idea of getting 180 units, but creating something that is more grounded to the ground and scale-wise, that gave all the enhancements of living in a community. Call this porosity in design because it's bringing the inside out and the outside in whilst protecting us from rain and sun, but a more breathable design, I would say. The next building is the Courtyard Campus. I don't know if you know our Harriet Watt building in Putrajaya. It's a large green roof that curves all the way up, and in phase 1 and in phase 2 will come down to the ground as the campus capacity grows. And that idea was basically part of greening Putrajaya, or continuing what we call the green continuum, which Putrajaya, being one of the greenest cities in Malaysia, that's what we wanted to express. Coming from that experience, Courtyard Campus, it's 4010 Open Lab. It's under construction now. And it's essentially an idea of playing with breaking the space and the idea of exploring energy in the building because it's Uni 10. And the way the garden works inside is like creating a series of gardens that are like a vortex spin inside that space. So the building has a research labs all at the bottom and teaching labs at the top. It has a central garden that goes inside the building, so it's actually quite unique in that way. And that garden is like a green vortex inside that space. That's the roof view of it. That's an image of what that courtyard will be like, and the series of labs that go around. It's a very interesting building, and I would say it's probably inspired slightly by the COE building, Waste to Energy Research Center, that training center, small building that we've done in Seremban. But this is on a larger scale. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting building. Obviously, the building facade fabric is shading the inside teaching spaces, creating a sort of lattice skin around the building. Most of us, and I think you too, moving forward, will probably be looking at more and more into competitions. And most of our projects are won through competitions. It's not necessarily through like the last one that we're going to show you later on. A lot of architectural work is actually through competitions, and it's interesting for us because competitions give us the opportunity to do research, and that research informs us later in the design of the buildings we do. In this one, we sometimes do an international competition. We did in Dubai for a library, which we came second place. In Kazakhstan, we came second place to big, actually, for the Kazakhstan president's building. We came third place for a mosque in Kazakhstan. So it's not necessary we're going to make number one, but it is a lot of work, but it is definitely very interesting. In this one in India, it was a museum by the very important India Gate in Delhi. It's a war memorial museum. We were selected one of 7 out of 160 to present in India. And this war museum was more about building the museum underground than it was above ground. We wanted to maintain all the greenscape and all the old trees that are here and create the experience of the museum underground. This is the entrance building, and the basis of this idea was based on the Chakra Yuha formation, which is, if you know what the chakra is actually a maze formation of a war to capture the enemy. So it's used in wartime, in the traditional wartime, as to capture the enemy by creating a maze formation. We thought that was a very unique idea to bring into this building. But instead of being a circle chakra, as you can see, it's a different form chakra. And in India, there is this very famous Abanari step well, which is an underground step well that collects water, but is also a palace. And so building underground, we thought that was a very nice analogy of creating the space underneath. So some of these were the concept diagrams before we start the building. And you can see we completely, for the competition, do the solar studies and the environmental impact of this building and what we could do. In this case, we're using ground cooling because in that climate, we can actually get some use of ground cooling, which is more effective than in a tropical environment. So you have to respond both to the culture and the environment when you're designing the building there. This was the pop-up structures that are basically looking like, I don't know if you know, but in war, basically they build bunkers to protect them, and they have only these slits to look out. And this was brought into some of the pop-up buildings that emerged out. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but and it was won by an Indian architect. But they've not moved forward and built this. So lastly, Adriata said I should actually present to you biodiversity. So what were we doing in lockdown? In lockdown, we were developing biodiversity for Penang South Islands in the full MCO and RMCO. We were working from Kuala Lumpur in collaboration with BIG in New York, Denmark, and London. So the time zone was crazy. We were working till 12 o'clock at our night, and they would be working till 3 a.m. their time just to develop this. And I've got to say, it is one of the best collaborations that we've ever done. Working with BIG, we thought would be very daunting, but in fact, working with BIG was a full collaboration experience, and for us, it was quite unique. So I know there's a lot of comments about the idea of biodiversity. So let me just say that the approach that we took for this, which has another series of layers to it, was in event to celebrate the biodiversity we have in Malaysia. And at another level going down is to create a net positive master plan for the new islands. We have looked at new ways or different ways to do reclamation. Whether that will be adopted or not is another thing. But we have explored that in order not to affect the fisheries. In fact, the first day, so how you start is how you end. On the first day of the competition briefing, there were five people from all over the world, internationally and locally, that were assembled. On the very first day, we went down to the fishing villages and 2 fishing areas, both onto the right and to the left, and they both gave completely different views to what they saw the future of the Penang South Islands. But we went and chatted with them because we wanted to get on the ground the sense of inclusivity in the design or the ideas that we generate for this building. So from small buildings to big buildings to master plans, it is a completely different approach to designing. That same slide that I showed you before, as I said, whatever research you do before seems to come back later in some form or another. So Big wanted to express the opportunities of biodiversity here, including the cultural diversity that's unique to Penang, and in the creation of what we call urban lily pads, where we know that the total population here may rise to about 3,780,000 or 400,000 population in the future. How do we future-proof it from the climate change of rising water? How do we increase the biodiversity and not take away the biodiversity that's there? Just to let you know that the depth and extension of this is the 3 Mile line, and in fact the 3 Mile line is fairly shallow in this southern area itself. And then looking at bioresources strategy in terms of how we will build and how our mobility. So in the entire concept is biomobility, bioresources, biofinancials. That was the total approach that we took for this master plan, and the importance of ecological networks. So I come back to finishing and life on Earth and possible life on Mars. I don't see the fascination for life on Mars. I appreciated the competition last year on Life on Mars, by the way, which was won by one of the guys that works at Hijjas. But more than anything is that this painting, which I heard has appeared on other people's presentations, but this painting tells me a lot about what we are missing out on. This is a painting by Ibrahim Hussein, which I knew when I was a child. I was given one of the paintings, and he was a very, very funny, dynamic painter, and one of the best Malaysian painters. He painted this just 1 year after the first man landed on the moon. And he said, right at that time, on the 13th, when they landed, right at that time, this is my father in Sungai Limau Dalam. And from his view is rice fields and rambutan, durian, pisang. From the view of Buzz Aldrin, the man who did not step off but was visualizing the first step. He was one of the first astronauts, and he's the famous Buzz Lightyear that you hear. His view was, and his words was, magnificent desolation. was the view of the moon. And so in the painting that Ibrahim says shows is this, that in the view of the astronaut as he arrives, he's basically seeing life on Earth. And in the magnificent desolation of the moon, you really want to be back on Earth. So I think we owe it to ourselves to flatten the climate curve, which has already reached the green ceiling. Thank you very much. I think you can show the video. I think we have a little video of the Penang South Islands just to display now.
Malaysia is one of the most culturally and biologically diverse countries on Earth. Penang's strategic location on the Malacca Strait, at the crossroads of the world, is today a cosmopolitan hub. Creating a successful new city means integrating with and extending this energy and local culture.
Yup, betul. Kita ada buat fishing boat, go to lighthouse, jungle trekking, barbecue, macam tu lah kita punya business kan.
Penduduk kena jaga kita, persekitaran kita, ekosistem maksudnya kena jaga juga kita.
If Penang is defined by its rich cultural diversity and its abundant biodiversity, we would like to envision the Penang South Islands as an archipelago where the two can coexist in a human-made ecosystem, expanding and enhancing one another. We propose the creation of urban lily pads, organized by a cellular structure of urban districts connected by natural patches and corridors for habitat. The Penang Biodiversity.
Wow, wonderful, Serena.
Thank you.
Such a very interesting and very inspiring, hopefully to all the students, yeah. And then for me as an architect, on behalf for the PAM, we are so proud and honored to you and Hijjas Kasri managed to win this competition with big, and then you will be inspiring to all Malaysian architects to global. Yeah. Well, it seems that everybody clueless. Sorry, there's no question at all. Yeah. So I mean, there's one question from the student when he saw your staircase and then asked, asked from the comment that is it made by concrete, and I believe it's made by concrete. One of
No,
your
no, it's made
no,
with steel.
steel. All right,
Steel.
wonderful. All right, okay. It looks
Yeah.
like made by concrete.
It's like a corkscrew going up, all in steel. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Very tough.
Right, right. Let me check it out. Okay, I mean, this is what I heard. By knowing how the environmental is pulling your strings and playing you is critical to making responsive rather than reactive moves. So as an architect and also as a designer, and then students has to believe that the design have to be responsive with environment. Because for me, the major challenges in the world of architecture are the result of the difference between how nature works and the way how people think. So on behalf of the students, I mean, this is the very common challenges from the students when they start to have their process in design, and then mostly of their lecturers commented. Can you advise to all the students how to make a design to respond by the environment? Can you just give a tips for them?
I mean, there's a lot of examples that are being shown now in terms of being responsive to nature. I think that the first premise is that if possible, but it all depends on the brief. You try to respond passive design. Some people go into biophilic. But I think that you make a conscious decision in terms of, how can how can I respond to nature? How can I bring down the energy? Is that through the building fabric, or is that in terms of how I plan? They must be something that can be uh, calculated in the sense that has some value to it, I think. So, and not to take things too literally. I mean, to take the essence of an idea and then to explore that idea through, basically. I find that when there are too many ideas, quite a lot of polytechnics tend to sort of mix a lot of ideas into their design. I think that you don't get the purity of the idea and the strength of that idea if you are trying to combine too many ideas into one. It doesn't work that way.
Right, right. I mean, this is the very common challenges from the students when they've done the site analysis and then synthesis, and then they have a SWOT analysis, and there is a gap how to portray their idea. And then when you start talking about how to respond environment, this is a very common challenge just from the student when they start talking about function follow form or form follow function. So by looking on all this Hijjas project, it looks like more to the formatics, and then they have a symbols that. Can you advise to the student how to make it form and function is going to be unity, to be one? Because people start confused. Is it going to be function follow form, the spaces follow the form, or the form follow function, or maybe could be both? Serina.
The functions are basically, for me, is the brief. So you still have, if it's going to be an office type, I'd be thinking, how can I do an office type that is not the same as how we're working now? So I would start with that. I would ask the whys, and then I will explore that idea through the design by what best expresses that, basically. But you will always come with an inspiration of some kind. You will start with that inspiration, and then you will see whether you can develop that inspiration to meet with your brief. So, a high-rise building, you could say, should be a square box, but you can see that we don't do a square box.
Right.
We came with the idea of the inspiration for Telecom Malaysia. Shall I give you exactly? I just came from Foster's in London, and one of the first towers there was the Commerce Bank, was the one green tower which had gardens on 3 sides. And I said to myself, could I do a tower for Telecom that would have gardens on 2 sides?
Mm-hmm.
And that I would basically get smaller sense of office in a vertical tower. So that's how the conversation started. Could I make an office with gardens going up, and there will be big gardens, not just small little terrace gardens or whatever, that the actual spaces that people go out. So that's how we started. So, and then the geometry tells me that to have garden on two sides must be something that's elliptical. And then, but the office must be very, how do you say? It must be very efficient. It must still be an efficiency of 75%. How can I do that? So, you know, you still have to solve all these items. There seems to be a lot of questions coming out.
Yeah. Let's go one by one now. They start warming up now. Let's go for one question. I believe this is from overseas student Moji Ashuri. Yeah. Thank you so much for the talk, Serina. There has been much attention given to architecture and its role towards having a healthy environment. So what is your point of view? Oops, where is it? What is point of view of interior architecture and interior design? Do you think this field must also work harder towards achieving sustainable development goals?
You know, in my time when we were doing architecture, there wasn't something called interior architecture. Now they call it interior architecture. I think, and I'll give you an example. We're doing a tower for FINAS, Film Negara Malaysia. You know, the building has a slight slant to it. So how do you do the building facade and how do you do the interior of the works inside to a slanting facade? Well, if you change the planning to be more that the interior is going to have individual spaces and is more open plan on the outside, then you will not have the partitions coming to that. You will also have much better views to the outside. So the space planning internally for interiors should respond, or you should be cognizant about the opportunities of what the interior planning should be. My office is very generalized, but when you get to something that's more specific, like a hospital designs have changed completely. We are getting hospital designs that appreciate more health and well-being, more views to the outside, more greenery, more terracing, more, you know, and that's actually going to affect the people that's working inside and the design. So I think interior architecture shouldn't start last. It shouldn't be, I'm going to fit out this building. The architect should be cognizant about how this building is going to work in terms of how do you want the people to work inside the space. So interior is part of it.
Indeed, I totally agree. Yeah, I think we should think how the way you design a space and how you want to create your interior architecture into it at the primary concept idea stage. So the next question from Nick Sulaiman, Serina. He totally impressed your high density concept just now, and then he asking that how to improve the tall, low cost housing in the city. Can you share with us?
You know, I'd have to refer to, you know, my colleagues in the globe. I think some works by Woha is very interesting, where we are you know, that's where introducing horizontal living in a vertical scape is very important. And perhaps I didn't touch on that on any other examples, but you are introducing vertical breaks, vertical gardens, vertical spaces that people basically can feel. I think one of the best examples in Singapore is the stacked building. I don't like the look of it. It's by the world's famous architect. I don't like the look of it, but the idea of the planning, and in fact, I know somebody living in there, is that you're creating smaller communities up in the sky. So if you come with the idea, I want to create smaller community spaces or places in the sky, this is what you need to do in the high density.
Okay, good. Okay, this is the question from the MASA committee, students from MASA, Vinci. Hi, Serina. It was a really interesting lecture series and I totally enjoyed a lot. So the question now, how do you actually get these inspiring concept and develop from it? Your personal opinion, Serina.
sometimes it's not just by one person. So let's just make it true. I mean, I represent Hijjas, but there's a lot of guys in the team. I might stir the direction in terms of the ideas, but we do sometimes comes with something that's inspiring. Sometimes it comes with the idea first, and then the idea is enforced by something else. So I'll give you an example. We did a competition in Saudi Arabia for Makkah many years ago. And this idea of a digital screen to protect the space inside that was both contemporary but interesting was developed at that time. We never did it. We never won that competition. But that same building facade idea of a digitized screen came into Bank Negara. It came into Ames University. So I think as you are exploring things, you are looking at a lot of things. These ideas stay in your memory, and so when an opportunity comes to build something, I'll give you another example. Bank Negara's second building, which has been just being completed now, was a competition. We were in the top 3, I think. What we developed there was timber facades, which were these basic pods in the sky. And you can see that we didn't win that competition, but this idea stayed in our mind when we did the pavilion for, so it's interesting how memory of something will come back in, and the opportunity to do that will appear when it does, I think.
Right.
I can't say to you, when we started the biodiversity, we spent 6 weeks research.
Yeah.
Big, Ramble, and Hijjas were all given a task to do specific research. And we had to present the research of ideas to each other to see what was the generating ideas that will make this master plan. So research for ideas or elements, whether it's cultural, whether it's something that you're inspired from the past or whatever, needs to be done at the beginning, and there is no escaping it.
Right. I concur that, because when you start to creating your ideas, I think the best format for all the students is when you start to discuss and brainstorm, working as a team, studying as a team. So, and then do a lot of research, and then do discuss with your tutors, your lecturers. Don't miss your crit session. This is what my personal advice. Yeah, Serena, because I tell you the truth.
Crit session.
Yeah, I tell you the truth, because they skip their tutorial session with their lecturers, and then they start to, working alone. I always believe that as an architect, you're always working as a team, because together everyone achieve more. You know what I mean? So, okay, now Serena, now coming to this special question, I can see a lot of questions regards with biodiversity, your involvement with BIG, Big and Ramble. So there's one questions from Fitio. Wonderful and inspiring works. Thank you, Architect Serena, for such wonderful sharing and presentation. Would be good to see you presenting this wonderful work in our next datum. Wow, okay, all right, coming soon. So now the question is the biodiversity going ahead, and would this mean our current urban planning and building guidelines will need to do catching up with your futuristic ideas? What is your feedback about this?
I think that's a very interesting question, because like all competitions, you start with the best ideas you can actually get. We use this analogy of the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, for example. When Foster's did that competition for that tower looked very different from what it looks today. But the essence of the ideas, we are trying to keep as much as possible during the process of the design development of the master plan. Is biodiversity going ahead? We hope so. But there is a lot of work to be done in terms of setting or trying to aspire to slightly higher goals. Let's put it this way. Goals in terms that are not normal in the sort of construction and development, where we are thinking a little bit more ahead in preparing ourselves for the climate change. And I see some other questions here with regards to displacement of water. Yeah, I think the master plan, for example, mobility. Let's take mobility.
Mobility.
We have to change the idea that we are not going to use as much cars as we have. In Malaysia, we have, in Kuala Lumpur and Wilayah, 7 million vehicles and 7 million people. That's almost a one-to-one.
Right.
So we would have to change, and we need to change that, because we can't have a total one-on-one mobility. So that's one. Car parking, for example, podium car parks should not be something of the future. We should have everything come down to the ground. So yeah, there are going to be quite a lot. There's going to be some challenges.
Yeah.
We may not be able to achieve everything. It is our aspiration, but we're not sure what we will fully be able to achieve.
Right. One question from Shahira Muhammad. Hi, I'm excited about the future for architecture in Malaysia. However, I always find the design for South Penang Island competition is ironic, because reclamation itself might influence the original biodiversity. And also, how do you cater the local people who originally reside there, and how will they be empowered for similar projects like this? And then same question from Yvonne Leong, because this is some criticized perception. People was wondering the total area for biodiversity covered, and what is the impact of the replacement of the water ecology. So how you respond this, Serina?
In the design of the master plan, I'm not going to stand here and say to you nothing is going to be affected.
Right.
The reality is something is going to be affected. But the steps that we're trying to take in this, knowing that Penang is growing. Did you know that Penang Island has a retention of 49% of its forests as compared to mainland? That means they have retained 50% of their forests. As compared to the mainland Penang, it's much, much, much less than that. And yet nobody's making a sound about that. What I'm saying is there is not much land for Penang for it to grow. But if it's going to grow, we have to do it very much more sustainably. And of course, we also have to develop, we have to allow the ecology to grow there. So that is one of the high items on our 12 sustainable goals for the Penang South Islands.
Right. Okay,
Penang
maybe I could go
has not enough water supply to last to 2030.
Yes.
It has to clean up all its rivers to allow for retention of at least 10% to this population. So these are the real figures that we are cognizant of and are trying to do our best, basically.
I agree with that, because Penang is my hometown, Serina. And I can see that there's a lot of things you need to research to make improvement. I wish you all the best for that. Yeah. So maybe I can go for the last question from Irene Q de la Torre. I'm not sure, is it Malaysian or maybe from overseas student. So hello, may I ask which fauna types works best with tropical climates? Wow, because I heard that you and Big choose the type of flora and fauna concept that you might have incorporated with your project. So
well, we this is the first master plan, this identifying mangrove to be part of the landscape.
Right.
I have ever heard any, and the reason for this is mangroves are two things. One, they protect the shores. So if you're creating the shores, two, they increase habitat on the perimeters. And three, the highest carbon sink is mangroves and bamboo compared to normal tree planting. So this is just one example of, obviously we're looking for indigenous planting, but as I said, in this master plan, it had identified mangrove as part of the biodiversity story and feedback in terms of protecting our shoreline and creating something that is more natural. So we know there are the two islands on the south there. We know there's some coral reefs. We know there's some dying coral. We're also looking to see what coral reefs can be put into the sea that can instigate more growth. I don't know if you all know that that portion is actually one of the busiest channels and therefore actually has quite a lot of disturbance because it's one of the busiest channels in the world for shipping. So these are all elements that you do have to think about.
Wonderful, Serina. So before we end, I mean, is there any last words, any last advice to our all Malaysian students here, Serina?
What can I say? I still feel that we perform almost like students even to this stage because the level of curiosity that you must maintain, the level of innovation, and these two things are the only things that are going to probably push you further and hopefully don't make you skeptical about architecture in Malaysia. It's not easy, guys. It's tough. Any of the guys out there will tell you. So you have to, in order to keep that inspiration up and perjuangan, I would say, you have to inspire each other and try to do the right thing.
Thank you so much, Serina, for your precious time. And I still remember I met you during AGM and I whispered to you that, Serina, do you mind to contribute to our student through this platform? And then you respond to me, yeah, I love to do. That's the spirit of an architect. And we're so proud of you. And congratulations to Architect Hijjas and yourself and all your team to won this competition. And then wish you all the best. Thank you so much again, Serina. Thank you so much again.
MASA, and thank you, students. I mean, all I can say is, your works inspire as much as my housing project was because I went into a crit to see the works that you were doing at University Malaya. And that got me whether we could do it slightly differently. So, you inspire us as much as we do to you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Serina. Well, okay, dear viewers, students, the greatest threat to our planet is about to believe that someone else will save it. So let's work, let's study, let's learn with responsive, right? So don't forget, this is a very quick announcement. So there will be, the next series will be 4 architects will share with you under Architects Fast Forward. The theme is about Beyond the Studio. So do keep in touch with MASA, do keep in touch with architects. So we're gonna see you soon in the October month, the month of architecture. So with that, thank you so much again for all the viewers. Wish you all the best to the student. Do keep in touch with us. And I will pass back to our MC. Janwei, are you around?
Hello, yes, I'm around here. Thank you. Thank you so much to Architect Serina and Architect Ajanta.
Thank you.
With that, it marks the end of our talk today. Thank you for joining us on today's online sharing session by our special guest, Architect Serina Hijjas. Thank you so much, Architect Serina, for for that eye-opening, very interesting, and rich sharing. We hope everyone enjoyed it. I know I did. Also, a very big thank you to Architect Arjanta for being the moderator. And last but not least, I would like to thank Pam and CIS for giving us the opportunity to have this collaboration in Architects Online 2020. Do keep in touch and follow us on MASA's Instagram and Facebook for more updates. Until then, have a nice day, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Be safe. Bye.